Hello there, and welcome to yet another edition of the Digital Factory Show. This particular one is brought to you by Digital Times Africa in collaboration and partnership with SIA Africa. My name is Richard Joseph, and I'm super excited to host you guys once again. I'm coming to you from the entrepreneurial city of Lagos, Nigeria today. It's quite sunny, and it looks like an amazing day. I have with me on the call amazing individuals who are going to be joining me today to discuss something really pertinent. At this point, where we have quite a lot of quagmire of issues around the war in Ukraine and Russia, and the increase in fuel prices and how it's affecting Africa as a whole, we'll be looking at a focus on rail transportation in Africa with a focus in Ghana. And I'm just going to, at this point, bring up Christine of SIA Africa to really who's our partner or collaborators. Tell us about SIA Africa and why we are having the city planning review today and why this is of utmost important to the team at SIA Africa. Hi, Christine. Good to have you. Welcome on board.
Hi, thank you so much. On behalf of the SIA Africa family, I want to thank Digital Times Africa for collaborating with us once again and giving us the platform to reach audiences around the world. We are extremely grateful to our friends Arnold and Christian, who answered the call and took time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. We know how passionate you both are about innovative technology-driven development in Africa, especially in the transportation space, and more specific rail connectivity infrastructure. As an organization that values environmentally sustainable cities and transportation, as well as social justice and economic development, we are excited to be here today.
Thank you so much, Christine. Good to have you here, Arnold and Christian. At this point, I think we should just do the round of introduction. So I have with me on the call Mr. Arnold Parker, who's the CEO of Letshego Ghana. Letshego Ghana is Ghana's biggest provider of digital loans. It's a digital loan product, Quick Loan, has now become synonymous with mobile loans and to date has served over 4.2 million Ghanaians. Since the product was launched, approximately 36% of customers served to date are women, most of whom operate informally. And I'm super glad to have Arnold on this call to talk about the transport industry and probably what that could look like for the informal sector his organization actually serves. Hi, Arnold. Welcome. Good to have you on board. Um, on the other hand, I have someone who um, really holds the fort when it comes to transportation in Africa. This is the chairman of the Trans-Africa Rail Corporation, Railway Corporation. His name is Mr. Christian. He is an accomplished information management, corporate consulting, and complex project programs management specialist with over 30 years experience directing risk assessment and process enhancement projects for leading global companies in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Christian is a Swiss national living in Australia, Ghana born, and in Belgium, Congo, and raised in Ghana. He holds a bachelor degree in business administration from the University of um, Tübingen, Germany. I hope I got that right, and a master's degree in business engineering from New York City, USA. Hi, Christian. Good to have you on board. Welcome.
Hi to all. Well, nice to be here talking to you all.
Thank you so much. Today we are looking at the All Things SIA Africa, the City Planning Review, Episode 3. And today's theme is we are going to be delving deep into tech-driven road transportation with an emphasis on Ghana. Over the years, we've come to know that rail transport is an essential component of the overall transport system and has solidly contributed to growth and development of many countries. If you think about post-colonialism, during the times where a lot of African states got independence, rail was one of the solid models where we used to transport people or move people and goods from one place to another. In the recent years, that has for some reason relegated to the background. And today we're going to see how tech can actually make a case in exponentially creating growth in the rail industry. Let's get straight into it. Mr. Arnold, how are you?
Very well. How are you too?
Great. I'm just super excited to have you on board. I just want to kind of connect your interest in transportation coming from a financial background. Let's start from there.
All right, that's fine. So my interest really spans across city planning, city design, And when I travel across my country and to other African countries, as many as I have been to, I realize that there is a lot of work we have to do as a continent where movement of people are concerned, where transportation is concerned. And so rail coming in under transportation obviously is something that comes under my purview as well. So generally, I have had a very strong interest in economic development issues, and rail being one of the drivers of economic development is something that I believe we need to pay a lot of attention to in Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arnold. Let me get over now to Mr. Christian, who was the chairman of the Trans-African Railway Corporation. What does the state of the railway industry look like currently in Africa? Just maybe we should focus a little bit on Ghana. Hi, Christian. I hope you can hear me.
Please, can you repeat the question? I didn't understand, please. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, great. So I was asking,
Can you repeat
currently,
the
what
question,
does the
please?
rail industry look like? Is it booming? How does it look like? What does the landscape of the rail industry look like currently?
Well, looking at the railway, there's a lot of development in each continent, especially Africa, you're aware, has a lot to do. And that is also the reason why we started to go to think about connectivity within Africa. So our TransAfrica Railway Corporation project is running since 3 years, kicked off with the idea of the African continental free trade area, that there needs some sort of connectivity all over the continent. And that is where we are in now, and where we have identified this as a most important development if you compare the United States 200 years ago, when they have developed their economy, building railway from the East Coast to the West Coast. Something similar will have this decade on the African continent.
Awesome. When I take a look at TARC, that's the Trans African Railway Corporation, and one of the tagline I get to see is trade acceleration by regional connectivity. Looking across Africa and what sub-Saharan Africa can look like, with the onslaught of the AfTAC, the Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? Um, when do you think we are going to get to this point where we have an accelerated trade by regional connectivity?
Well, this depends on the commitments of the countries. As I mentioned to you, our project has been initiated from the sixth rec of Africa, being the diaspora of Europe. They have started this initiative. We have prepared everything. We have prepared the analysis of the African Union railway master plans. We have looked into 32 sub-Sahara country master plans, and we have came up with a solution where we are currently in discussion, in negotiation with 10 countries on the sub-Sahara Africa, including also Ghana. So we have everything prepared, if you want so, from design, definition of the project. We are preparing the finance now as well. We are just waiting on the commitment of the different railway ministries, ministries of transport and ministry of finance. And this is the big obstacle which still needs to be taken. So we are not starting now. We started 3 years ago, and we are waiting on the commitment. So it's a government which still needs to be pushed in the right direction.
Mr. Arnold, you agree with me that rail is a significant factor contributing to exponential movement of goods and services, especially given that you deal with the informal sector and mostly women, right? Having been in Ghana or currently residing in Ghana, could you kindly point us to what the Ghanaian rail sector looks like now?
Okay, thank you very much. So I can give you the foundation of Ghana's real sector, and Ghana's real sector owes its foundation to one governor, colonial governor by name Gordon Gordisberg, who was posted to the Gold Coast. He had initially come to the Gold Coast as a surveyor to attempt to survey the size of the colony. And then he went to Nigeria as well. He did a survey of southern and northern Nigeria. And then he was sent into the First World War to fight. After the First World War, he came back to the Gold Coast as a governor. And he immediately began to embark on expansion of infrastructure across the colony. And it would interest you to know, Joseph, that since then, that is actually the only real infrastructure that exists in Ghana today. We had what we call the Rail Triangle, the Golden Rail Triangle, which started from Accra, went all the way to the second largest city, Kumasi, and then went down to Takoradi, which is a port city, and then came back again into Accra. So this railway triangle has actually been the only railway network that exists in Ghana since after the First World War. What it then means is that even after independence, much attention has not been paid to the rail network that a country has. I mean, it's quite fascinating, essentially because rail is such a key component of economic development, and to have missed, I mean, that entire industry is very unfortunate indeed. And so after independence, what we saw basically was just a gradual deterioration of the country's rail network. And even though the triangle existed, it primarily existed to just carry a lot more goods, a lot of timber from the Ashanti region and from the western regions to the port in Takoradi, and then just some level of passenger rail between in Sawam and then Accra in the regional capital. But apart from that, there hasn't been much passenger railway services in the country, and the existing infrastructure was actually put in place in the 1920s. What we have seen, though, since 2017 has been a very deliberate attempt to begin a process of expanding this railway network. So there has been an agreement, for instance, with the Burkinabe government to actually now have a railway line from the port city in Tema, in the capital, all the way to Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, which is roughly about 1,100 kilometers away. There has been some level as well of railway expansion in other parts, so that we are beginning to see some level of expansion of the triangle. But all of this is currently in construction stage, and hopefully within the next few years, we should see the relaunch of Ghana's railway network. It will still not be an advanced high-speed rail network like we have seen in other countries, but at least it's a start, and it should then be able to help us not just to open the economy up, because I believe that most of the countries open up now, but really to now actually ease the movement of goods and people. So there is really so much work to be done where rail infrastructure is concerned in Ghana. Most goods and people are actually hauled over roads. Most of the roads would deteriorate within a few years of construction, and rail indeed holds the key to being able to move goods and people around the country.
I like how you ended, Mr. Arnold. Rail indeed holds the key to movement of people in country, especially in these times where we have more choked up cities, where we're looking at decentralizing people. But I'm quite concerned that we missed the opportunities that existed. Looking at 1920 up to date, that is close to that's over 100 years, right? And that's quite way behind, right? And I'm just gonna come back to Christian here and kindly ask him: do you think that tech could actually drive redefinition or an exponential growth in the current rail industry we have?
Yeah, I think Turkey is exactly the instrument for the African continent, not just for a single country, but to connect, let's say, the idea to connect the sub-Sahara Africa countries from Dhaka through the ECOWAS Regional Economic Community into the Central African Community, to the East African Community, and down to the South African community. And if this is possible, connecting 24,000 railway kilometers in sub-Saharan Africa, connecting the ports, the airports, and the capitals only. So that's why we call it a corridor and not the complete railway master plan of each country, just a corridor from west to east or from north to south. If this is possible, just think about the possibility of being able to travel from Accra, Ghana, to Lagos and back again on the same day. And on this railway, you can even transport a mummy lorry or a car or a truck. So you are able to bring goods in the morning to Lagos and in the evening you're back again. If you imagine this possibility that can be done between Ghana and Lagos, it can also be done between Lagos and Douala. It can be done between Douala, Cameroon, and Angola and Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is possible if everyone is willing on the African continent to invest in this business model we have identified, which is a private sector-oriented business model. It's equity, which comes into the African continent, and it can only be driven from a private company. This is like if Qatar Airlines or Turkish Airlines or Lufthansa would build a company in Africa, being in charge to operate a high-speed rail all over the continent, also transporting goods. And if this is possible, and it's only a decision now which needs to be made from the governments because everything has been prepared, you can build 24,000 kilometer high-speed rail in this decade, meaning 35 years earlier than the Agenda 2063. If China can build 30,000 railway kilometers in 5 years, why shouldn't Africa be able to build 24,000 kilometers in 5 years as well? So this is our plan. We are pretty happy and pretty sure this is going to happen, although a lot of mindsets needs to change on the African Union level, on the government level, because you need to give concession. You need to open the market for the private sector. That's the one thing. And the other thing, because private sector is investing a lot of money in such an infrastructure, the complete governance of this project from design, build, finance, operation, and maintained must stay into private hands. So the build, operate, transfer models of the past 4 or 5 decades, which happened in big infrastructure projects, this must change. You can never give power to government to invest in their own railway company that they are able to operate 100 years from now a high-speed rail in future. That's why it needs to be from private sector invested, from centrally managed and operated for the African continent and for the countries. This is our opinion, and this is where we are in negotiation with a lot of countries at the moment.
I can see you having quite a lot of challenge dealing with the African Union and a lot more bodies which are uh, part and parcel of the entire process, because you made mention of something which is quite exciting, that the build, operate, and transfer model must stay in private hands. What's your take on that, Mr. Arnold? What do you think? Could that be the solution, or the solution to rail transport in Africa? Privatization?
Yes, it's actually one of the solutions, and it's a better solution. You would have to understand also then that most governments in Africa have tended to run down state-owned institutions, not necessarily because these institutions are state-owned, but principally because they tend to interfere with the commercial dynamics of enterprises. And so, if we would put this in the hands of the private sector to run, then obviously we are going to see some very good improvement and innovation over time. However, what's important then to understand is that it has to be done in such terms that it is also commercially viable and feasible. We've seen two major private sector projects, for instance, in Africa over the last half decade: the Nairobi Mombasa Highway and then the Lagos Ibadan Highway. And these are train highways that are fully funded with foreign money. But the way it's been done is that it's been done as a debt arrangement, and the pricing and the ticketing of these have actually not just been average. And so you'd realize that the return on investments have not been as expected. And it had then meant that if the government have guaranteed these private sector investments, they could end up taking the liability. So, in as much as I would call for private sector involvement, I'd also call for these to be done in such convenient terms that it's a win-win situation. And for the private sector going into this space, there has to be a very long-term goal and a long-term view over how long returns are supposed to be expected, such that in doing that, we will then be able to have a service, a railway service that's actually affordable for the average African to be able to use. And so that will be the key approach to ensuring that not just do we provide the real service, but it's provided in a way that makes it very affordable.
I just want to find out something quick, shortly here. I mean, you spoke about the Lagos Ibadan rail project and the Nairobi Mombasa. I'm privileged to have sat on a train from Lagos to Ibadan quite recently, and it was fascinating because it's faster travel time compared to sitting in a regular car with all the traffic on the way. But then again, I just wanted to find out, right? I'm sure you've had extensive research around city planning and management and rail transport, right, across Africa, maybe across Europe. Right? What are existing models that are currently feasible, and where can we find them? How can Africa learn from them? Because it's not just a problem of the government; it still has to do with the mindset of humans, Africans, right? Um, could you kindly share? I mean, you and Christian particularly share with us what models are available, what can we learn from them, and maybe that would actually influence a lot of dynamics.
All right. So, in terms of models, I mean, let me look at it in two ways. First and foremost, the model in terms of the tech that's required for the kind of transportation to open up, or not just to open up, but decongest African cities. So, if you look at the major African capitals, for instance, they have now become traffic nightmares. You have the all famous Lagos traffic, and of course, Accra is also getting to Lagos levels in terms of vehicular traffic. You also have traffic in Nairobi as well and other African cities. Now, what we need to do when it comes to decongesting the vehicular traffic of these cities is to immediately look at overground railway systems, essentially because most of our cities have been planned really without an integral railway network. And to put railways on the ground would obviously just mean that we may have to go through buildings, bridges, break down a lot more concrete along the way. However, if we adopt overground rail systems like you see a lot of in Tokyo, for instance, that could potentially begin to ease vehicular traffic across the cities and allow a lot of African cities to begin to breathe. So, for instance, you see that in Lagos, we have the mainland bridges, first, second, third mainland bridges, but these are all meant for vehicles. How about a mainland bridge that is rail, that is not having traffic, that just moves from terminal to terminal without traffic and moves people speedily across the city? How about an overground railway network from, let's say, Kaswa on the edge of the Accra region all the way into Accra Central, a route that takes roughly a couple of hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis. And so, to your point, yes, railway travel also gets to be very convenient. And the model that should exist now, we should be looking at is overground rails. Now, in terms of the model for financing and construction and ownership and all of that, then we should be looking at, like Chris said earlier, 25 to 30 to 40-year financing models that allows the services to pay for itself over a longer duration. And in Ghana, for instance, where we began to pool a lot of long-term money, let's say, in the area of pension funds, for instance, we should actually be able to tap into some of these pension funds to now use it to invest into real infrastructure so that because pension funds are usually patient capital, we can now begin to earn the returns over time to pay back on these funds. So these would be the two ways that I'd want to tackle your question, Richard, so that we look at first and foremost the mode in terms of what kind of real, I mean, it will be exorbitantly expensive. I mean, today, if you want to have underground railway networks, you're looking at close to somewhere around $1 billion per kilometer, depending on what kind of technology you are using. If you want to have an overground railway network, it could be anywhere from, let's say, $1 to $3 million per kilometer. And that would obviously be a very easy approach for Africans to consider as we begin to decongest our cities.
Thank you for the submission. I think the two models you've mentioned are quite intriguing, and just looking at the congestion of African cities. But then I'll just come over to Christian because I haven't founded, or he is the chairman of TAC. They've put in a lot of extensive research into how these models might probably translate to be sustainable, right? What are some of the innovative ways that we could get these models off the ground and ensure that we have a thriving decongested city whilst we are able being able to move people from one place to another with convenience.
Yeah, thank you. There are many if you we have taken, and we said we want to align our African high-speed railway network on behalf of the Africa Integrated High-Speed Rail Program, which is already running since 2008, but not much has happened yet in terms of realization. And as I mentioned to you also, what our focus is not to develop each country's railway master plans. We want to connect the countries. We want to connect the ports, the seaports, the airports, and the capitals. And the high-speed rail project, which we have planned, will never go into the congested cities like Accra or like Lagos or Abuja whatsoever. We will always go where the airport is, and the airport normally is a little bit outside of the big cities. The first thing. The second thing, which is a very strong advantage, if you are developing a high speed rail train, and I'm talking about a real high speed rail, not the one which is in operation in Ethiopia, for example. I'm talking about the one which is already in operation in Morocco with 280 kilometer, the first real high speed rail with the technology which is proven in Europe from Germany or from France or from Switzerland. So we are not trying to make experiments. We try to take a technology into Africa which is already working. We will connect the most important commercial centers, and we will never go into the center of the capitals. From the airport area, there are other solutions for the public urban transport, like ropeway systems, which are a valuable solution, for example, looking into South America, where they have solved the problem of major city congestion. And again, I want to emphasize that we are calculating with 10 million US dollar per kilometer for a high speed rail. That's about 3 to 4 times more than actually it is planned on the African continent if you build a new railway on standard gauge. But this is just, old technology with a diesel railway facility with cargo. So our high-speed rail, which is a proven technology, will cost about 10 million per kilometer. And we want to build this 24,000 kilometer, meaning the complete project, including electrification, because this is also a very important point to adapt to the global climate change. It must be electric diesel, high-speed rail. All together, that will cost 300 billion US dollar. So this is one of the biggest projects ever happened on the African continent, and it will happen as soon as the African Union, NEPAD PIDA program, and also the Ministries of Transport and Ministries of Finance, when they accept this business model, and it will be built up as a Pan-African company in Africa. Our idea is to have the headquarter in Accra, Ghana. This is where we started, and all in each region we will have regional headquarters, and in each country we will have the local headquarters who can manage then the cargo transport of goods which needs to be transported on behalf of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And I'm not talking about the minerals, the exploiting. You know, there are some other, many other projects running on the African continent, also in Ghana. For example, Accra, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, or Benin or Togo. They these are the projects where they are connecting the landlocked countries to exploit the minerals into the ports. This is another issue. I'm talking about setting up a high-tech, modern connectivity within the whole African continent, that people from small, medium, and large enterprises can transport their goods all around the African continent instead of shipping them by ship around Africa or flying them with the airplanes into the airports. So this, the idea, and as I mentioned also, it can only be done from a private sector investment. It can never be managed from any government alone. And that is what we are fighting, what we will get the commitments soon to start the technical feasibility studies and also construction.
Thank you so much, Christian. I think that was quite an encompassing overview you've just laid down there. If you just joined us, you're watching Digital Factory Live, brought to you by SIA Africa in partnership with Digital Times Africa. And we are discussing the rail industry in Africa, looking at how tech or tech driven road transport, just emphasizing on the country Ghana. Um, it's quite fascinating to hear you reecho what Mr. Arnold made mention of earlier, where we have terrible maintenance culture by governmental institution, and privatization being the way forward, right, Mr. Arnold? Um, Looking at the model, TAC is looking at operationalizing and 300 billion dollars over 20,000, 24,000 kilometer rail projects from ports to ports or ports to airports. Right? What are your thoughts around these?
Yeah, I think it's great, and he makes a strong case. Usually, the kind of figure he mentions, I can imagine that it would scare a couple of governments, and it creates some tension. So, but it's important because when you mention a big figure like $350 billion, then it means that a lot of things are going to be done by are going to be done on scale, and that obviously brings the cost down, which is why I'm very pleased and enthused to hear that he's talking about $10 million per kilometer of a high-speed rail. I mean, if you look around the world, I think it's only China that has been able to accomplish uh, that kind of feat with having the cost of a kilometer of high-speed rail being $20 million and below. So for Chris to be able to deliver it at 10, it'll be quite interesting to see how this is going to happen. But then that said, I mean, I like his model about interconnecting the African cities, which is great, which really helps. I mean, if you look at the Accra Lagos corridor, for instance, that's a lot of traffic for travel. And if we replace that corridor with rail, obviously we'd see a lot of traffic. But also, I think the one that makes immediate impact as well should be intercity. Perhaps intercity, because you see, intercity does not need usually high speed rail. High speed rail is actually across cities. And so when we do the high-speed rail across regional cities, state capitals, and all of that, we get to be able to then generate the kind of traffic that helps for free flow of movement. But there is also a challenge that exists currently within cities like Accra and Lagos, that actually require some innovative approaches as well. And perhaps if that is not within the purview of TAC at the moment, they are still relevant in terms of what has to be done to solve the problem. I mean, you look at like I said earlier, the mainland bridges, the traffic on the mainland bridges, the Ojuelegba area, the Oshodi area, the Apapa route, and all of that. You clearly see that there has to be a solution to actually decongest the cities of vehicular traffic, and rail holds that solution to a large extent. And so it has to be a combination of both. TAC is great, it's a great concept. It requires a lot more attention from African governments to buy into. And then also, it just once they have the buy-in, they must be able to now ensure that they would own the narrative around it and allow this to grow. Because on the back of Africa free trade, for instance, you would need to allow goods to move across the entire continent. And how better for goods to move than through rail? So all in all, it's important. Intra-Africa, intercity rail are all equally important in this case.
I'm gonna stick and stay with you here, Mr. Arnold. And the reason I'm doing this is because you run a financial organization, right, a Shego that provides loan and access to some of these market women. And in order for, I mean, most of the challenges with these women is transporting their goods from one city to the other, right? TAC has a very prominent model, something which is very promising that would help solve the African border, like the transportation of goods from one African city to the other African city. But now let's do a deep dive into intra-city transportation. Away from rail, could they be alternative solution, right? Because I see in Accra, for instance, we have what we call the BRT buses. I mean, they're called Ayololo, right? And in Lagos, Nigeria, we have what we call the BRT buses, where you can transport goods and services using the BRT buses. They have specified lane for BRT buses. I don't see that happening in Accra where we have specified lane for the Ayalolo buses. But what could be the immediate term solution solving intra-city transportation or logistics or movement of people, especially at this point where we have uh, ridiculous increase in the price of fuel?
Yeah, I think the very short-term solution for the transport problems would be around busing. Very convenient, efficient buses that allow um, middle income workers to be very comfortable to park their cars at home and join the buses. Now you'd realize that most of Accra and Lagos's public transport system, one, are private, and two, has very rickety vehicles. So even taxis as well, up until the era of ride hailing like Uber and the rest, most of our taxis are also usually not very even up to standard. But we need to have very good, convenient, and decent buses on the roads. We need to actually legislate what kind of buses can be used for public transportation. And then once we do that, we are going to start seeing that it becomes more convenient for people to park their cars at home, especially even in this era of very high fuel prices. It would actually make economic sense to just take a walk, which is healthy, get to a nearby bus station, hop on a bus, get to the nearest bus station to your workplace, and then walk and all of that. We are going to see stress levels even come down. A lot of lifestyle diseases are going to start disappearing and all of that from these populations. And so there has to be some work around the public transport system in African cities, and especially even if they are going to be private run, there must be very strong rules around routes planning, around types of buses and vehicles that are used for these routes. And I believe that will go a long way, really, to solve a lot of the problems we are currently seeing in African cities.
Let me get your thoughts on this, Chris. I mean, I see that you're very much focused on the Africa Free Trade Area, and you're just ensuring that we have high-speed rail transportation across African cities, from one African city to the other. But then again, having worked as a consultant and consulted in Asia, Europe, and the Americas, right? What are some of the key takeaways we could learn from some of these already existing in nations that have solved the challenges in um, logistics for intra-cities, right? What could be a probable solution to the mashed up traffic situation in African cities like Lagos, Accra, in the interim?
Yeah, so yeah, like I've said, I mean, so the buses are key, but also in the medium term, we have
Mr.
to
Arnold,
begin
you will
to.
come in. I wanted to pick the thought of Christine on this because
Chris, okay,
yeah,
all
then
right,
then I'll come back to you.
great.
I think if I got the question right, you were asking what is a possible solution taking into consideration the viable which are working all around the world. And one, in my opinion, which works very fine, let's talk about and other big cities with over 3, 4, 5 million people. Kinshasa alone, the only possible solution, which I think works in future, you should look into the solutions they have done in South America, in the same mega cities. And what have they done there? For African countries, it's not imaginable yet, but imagine the possibility that you can solve the public urban transport congestions and bring a solution with a ropeway system in each city. Just imagine this. By a cable car all over your head, over the houses in each capital. This can solve the problem. Let's take the example of Accra, Makola Market to the airport, and from there for the students to the Legon University. You can bring in a solution which costs 1 million per kilometer only if you want to build it. So if you have to build 20 kilometers, it's about 20 million US dollar only for 20 kilometer. And you can have a traffic of about 4,000 to 5,000 people per hour with a cable car solution. And this is what we are proposing also in future in each major city of the world. Look into Vietnam, look into Asia, look into South America. Nothing has happened yet in Africa, with the exception of Morocco, Rabat, Casablanca, and so on. This is a very viable solution, a very new technology solution, also for African engineers, solar-powered technology, very cheap, very safe, and very effective. This is the proposal out of Austria for the whole African continent. You mentioned I live in Australia. This is wrong. I live in Austria. This is a
My apologies
state.
there.
This is a state in Europe with a lot of mountains, and that is where that technology comes in. This roper technology, which can also be used in major cities. Also, the railway, as I mentioned, comes also the know-how very strong of Switzerland and Austria, because they are running railways since over 100 years already, and that is where the expertise comes in. And we want to provide this knowledge of new technology for the African continent as well.
All right, I want our listeners, our viewers, to know that we are streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Also on Digital Times website. Please, if you're watching, feel free to drop your questions in the comment section below. We'll do well to address them towards the end of the program. You're watching the DT Africa Digital Times Africa Digital Factory Show, which is brought to you by SIA Africa. Let me get back to Arnold here. Arnold, kindly, sorry for taking that off from your mouth, but you can come back and share your thoughts.
No, no, it's fine. I actually realized that it was meant for Chris as well. So, but essentially, the die is cast, really. If we want to go very far as a continent and as countries within the continent, rail cannot be ignored anymore. Now is the time to really seriously consider rail and be able to then make the most use of it across the continent. You had asked earlier then about short-term solutions, which obviously lies in the buses. Ideally, even you are looking at electric buses that are running on batteries. So, like Chris said, you're able to then even power these buses using solar and all of that. But the transportation of people and goods across our cities must be of paramount concern to African government, and we must begin a process to resolve these challenges.
I'm just going to double back here on what the last statement you make. Transition of goods and services is paramount to the growth of African countries, right? And just looking at the systems we have in place, especially the cultural context, it's it's not just a case to build rails or maybe better modes of transportation. How do we fix the cultural issue, right? In terms of mismanagement, in terms of sustenance, that is managing things that are already made, right? And in terms of ownership.
Yeah, and that's important, which is why the movement into rail has to be managed such that we don't import the value chain. And so when we say we are building rail networks across Africa, it shouldn't be a case of buying coaches and rail tracks from maybe China or from Sweden or France, whichever country has technology for rail, or buying rail installment machines from Czech or from Hungary, or buying tracking systems and signaling systems from France and all of that. It's important, really, if we want to do rail as Africa, to begin to own the value chain. And so it's okay to bring in experts, it's okay to hire people who have the skill from across the world, but it's paramount to ensure that we own the process. So, for instance, it should start with one, what how much of the value chain are we going to develop locally? We are going to have to build the coaches. We're going to have to build the tracks. We're going to have to build the sleepers. We're going to have to work with our young people in tech to develop the signaling and tracking systems. And then you create that culture of we built it, we'll maintain it. Usually, we tend to have a very low maintenance culture across Africa. But one of the reasons is because we import entirely the technology that's supposed to be used. We import entirely the thinking and the framework that's used for most of the things we do. And when that happens, you also dislocate the ownership. So, in many factories across Africa, for instance, you would realize that once a machine is broken down, you are waiting for a technician to come from India or from China to come fix that machine before production can start again. That would not have to be the case. So it's important that we fuse all of these into our existing educational system. We have railway colleges, you have railway certification programs. You open up the entire value chain such that we are able to actually avoid. So, for instance, in the Nairobi Mombasa case, for instance, you find out that some of the trains are actually driven by Chinese, and whilst you can say, well, they are the financiers, they are more than enough qualified Kenyans to be able to handle trains across their own country. So we need to actually, it starts from owning the value chain, ensuring that a lot of production will be done locally, imbibing that production culture into the local workforce, and then it becomes easier to then pass on maintenance as well, because it's actually usually part of the training, so that we are able to then ensure that not only would we have built these rail networks, but would have also created a culture to really maintain them, whilst there's also an angle of innovation, open to new ideas and new technology to ensure that then these railway lines don't last beyond. Like you've seen in Ghana, the existing railway network was built 100 years ago, and we've not added kilometers to that network because there hasn't been railway research on what to even do to improve this. So a lot of work needs to be done in terms of internalizing the culture of building, and out of that, we can then be able to have the culture of maintenance.
I'm going to stick and stay with you here, Mr. Arnold. I'm just going to look at financial models that could help create a sustainable rail industry in Ghana, right? Would rail transport provide the economic upliftment for the nation? Let's start from there.
Yes, it definitely would. I mean, you spoke about women, for instance, who have to go to the farms across the country to buy lots of farm produce, bring it to markets down south to sell, and all of that. Most of these farm produce are carried by trucks, long vehicles. They get spoiled on the way. Most of them don't have. I mean, we don't have very good motorable roads as well across the country, apart from major cities. And so you'd realize that even though we have over relied on road transport, even our road transport network itself is not up to scratch. 2, 3 seasons of heavy rainfall, and then most of our roads are giving up. And so it requires that we focus then on the benefits that rail brings. And indeed, to your point, rail is really going to be a very big booster to economic development, because one of the things it will do very significantly is ensure that goods are transported at reasonable cost, and it has its overriding consequence of making sure that prices of goods would remain low. And that would then be a good thing indeed for a lot of consumers.
Over to you, Christine. Just gonna let's do a little bit of a deep dive on the tech model, yeah, because I see quite a lot of opportunities with tech. Well, what did African cities or African nations miss in the first place, right? And how we start looking at helping address some of these challenges.
Is it possible for me to share my screen so I can show you a little bit more about this idea?
Most definitely,
Is
feel
it
free.
possible?
You can.
So I share my screen.
And whilst we try to
Um,
ensure you get your screen shared, I'm just gonna come back to Mr. Arnold, right? Over 120 years
yes.
of having the rail triangle in Accra, in Ghana, right? Where did we get it wrong?
Quite interesting. I believe that we became very um, I think we became very strong admirers of the car. We like the privacy that the car brings us, and we wanted to have more cars, more trucks, and all of that. Let's not forget that, after the Second World War, um, when personal vehicles started coming up, especially with Ford cars and all of that, it slowed down the growth of the rail industry. And I'm sure perhaps African governments may have taken a signal from that to think that cars were the future and not real. And I'm
Hmm.
sure it is in that process of thinking that we possibly lost the real plot over there. And so we focus more on roads across cities than we focus on rail. And that's where we got it wrong. I mean, if we look at the China example again today, since 2003, they've done thousands of high-speed rail network, and that is just 2 decades ago, which then goes to show the importance of what rail does in opening up countries. And so that's how we got it wrong. I think we just thought that the cars were going to be the only things we need for the future, and apparently
Oh, I
it's not.
see. I see why we have a lot of cars in Africa. Then,
Yeah.
back to Christian. We can see your screen now.
Yeah, thank you. This is the screen which shows or describes the solution for the complete African continent, looking it in a conceptual way, complete together. Um, to be very sarcastic or to be very hard with my opinion, if we continue to build railway systems in Africa like we have built it in the past decades, or like we are still continuing to do so by developing 500 kilometers there, 200 kilometers there, 300 kilometers in another country, without concept, without strategy, without vision, just that, for example, on the Agenda 2063, it's politically driven that you have to connect landlocked countries, for example, which makes sense politically, but does it always make sense in terms of profitable business? So this is the mindset which needs to change in future. If you are planning railway systems in future, it has always to do with looking at a public service you provide on the African continent on behalf of the countries and on behalf of the African Union as a first-class service to each individual, either entity to transport goods or a private person to transport him instead of by airplane. It has to be a first-class service, and that's why it should be really driven from a private company, from a Pan-African private company. To be honest to you, before I explain you also this landscape, the problem at the moment in Africa is the not invented here syndrome in Africa. So if you are coming from outside, like the Sixth Reich, the diaspora people who have studied in England, in the United States, or whatsoever, railway engineers, electrification engineers, developers, business developers, and so on, if they want to provide such a good solution for the African continent, these people still struggle to get accepted on the African continent. Why? Because it's the African continent, many countries telling people, well, we have to do it our own, we have to have the value chain our own, but where do you start if you don't have nothing? If you don't have the real technology know-how, you have to build first. And that's why it's a combined approach from outside the Sixth Reich into Africa and within the African community. TARC, we named it TARC. First of all, it's where are we coming from? We are coming from the trade, agriculture development, rural development, and capital management. That's the first synonym of TARC. The second one is we are doing TARC, the high-speed rail, because we want the trade acceleration by regional connectivity. Just think about this. What does this mean if all the major cities, the major economic communities, if they are really connected? If you think about Accra, Lagos, and if Togo, Lome, or Benin, if they decide not to be part of it, you cannot transport goods from Accra to Lagos because just Togo or Benin is saying no. And if that is the case, you can forget TARC, you can forget regional connectivity, you can forget everything. You continue to do your railway projects in the future like you did it in the past, and it will never be successful. That's why we have come up with this solution. It's like a Marshall Plan with a centrally designed, built, financed, operation, and maintain model, not the BOT model, a build, operate, transfer to government. That will never happen. We will make government a maximum 20% share in the new Pan-African company, and we need to operate it for at least 35 years to recoup the investment of 300 billion US dollar. You have to have control on the finance, you have to have control on the design, on the build, on the construction, and on the operation, and then you can also recoup that investment. If you don't do it like this, you'll go broke in the first 5 to 10 years of operation. So this is the number one we are doing. Number two, we will contribute also the maximum maximum contribution on the eco environment, because railway is with 6 grams per kilometer carbon emission, the best efficient carbon footprint you will have. We will build electric roads on our railway tracks, because we will transport trucks and cars as well on the railway. Imagine, like in Europe, you are transporting trucks and cars. In Europe, you call it piggy piggyback solution. And this will be the same thing also, which is possible. So you don't need to build highways, 6-lane highways, 3 lanes in each direction. In future in Africa, you can build a 4-lane highways, and the rest of the 2-lane can be contributed to the high-speed rail. With that mentioned, like Arnold told, yes, of course, there will be a huge amount of complete new jobs which will be involved in the railway engineering workforce in future. That civil engineers, railway engineers. You have to build in future your own railway sleepers, your own railway tracks, even also the rolling stock should be able to be built in future in Africa. And this is what we are trying to do as well from the beginning. This everything there will boost the African economy for sure, because it's a massive investment. It's a massive investment also in the youth, in our young population, which are very well studied in Ghana, in Nigeria, all over the continent. We have a lot of bright people, young people. They want to change, they want to push in the right direction, and we will provide them the support. But not only this, the Green Deal, which is mentioned on the right side, we also have to look at the educational boost. We need to prepare the future also by setting up railway and agriculture universities. Why? Because along the railway tracks, we will build from scratch, very important. We will not take any existent railway, so we will build from scratch, which is much more easier to build within a decade. Along those tracks, we want to build additional, let's say, agriculture along those tracks. And with the profits, once profits are here, on behalf of our business model for the African Union, after 10 years, there will be profits. We want to reinvest those profits in additional road, highway, and railway infrastructure. So this is the big picture behind it. This shows you the sustainable development goals which are affected. If you take the example for Ghana, for today, for the sustainable development goals, this is the status as of at the end of 2021 in Ghana. It's quite similar in each sub-Sahara country. It's quite similar. But if the railway is here connecting all the sub-Sahara Africa countries, all the capitals, ports, and airports, if this is going to work within this decade, that will change dramatically like this. So this is the major change from here today in terms of readiness, robustness into here for the future. And how is this being made? Well, this has been made by, connecting. You see the green lines here. This is we call it the TARC backbone. It's the strategic corridor in a first phase to build those corridors, because we know that the brown corridors, they are already prepared. They are already in construction, connecting those landlocked countries in Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, or whatsoever. In a future phase, they will also be then re-engineered, electrified, and also double track. Will be double track, not just one track in one direction. Thank you.
Wow, that's quite encompassing. Um, I know that I see you smiling. Let me get your thoughts on this. I know. Did you hear me?
No, I did not hear you at all. I just heard the last words
Yeah.
of Chris.
Oh, okay, great. I want to get your thoughts on what Chris has shared so far. I mean, it's quite a very much drilled down process to ensure that we have Africa well mapped. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
No, I mean, if we listen carefully to Chris's presentation, we see the beginning of what would actually make the Africa Free Trade area a reality. I mean, most. So you have a lot of African countries by the coast, but are we going to be moving goods coast to coast? That'll be quite expensive. Shipping lines may possibly not be operating that way. However, if you look at what rail can do, where it opens up the movement of not just goods, but also for people as well, not only are we going to see a lot of trade across African countries, we'll see a lot of tourism as well. So there'll be intra-Africa trade, there'll also be intra-Africa tourism, and then there'll also be a lot of exploration of and opening up of economic opportunities. So he has in his slides the beginning of what can potentially transform the African continent, and I think it's important that we begin to listen and pay attention to what he wants. So I'm sure all the details can usually be worked out on a country to country level, but especially at the AU level, by now there should possibly be a dialogue team on an intra-Africa railway network to start engaging Chris on these ideas.
It's good to know that this is quite a long haul. I mean, this is a proposal that would 35 years. This is lasting up to 2063, right? But then I see quite a lot of challenges coming up here, especially with African nations and the pursuit for power, right? Something Chris mentioned in his submission was the beginning. Where do we start from when you don't know how to? Probably that's where he comes in, bringing in all the expertise, and I mean the knowledge, the know-how, having built and consulted over the past 30 years. Now, on trade, agriculture, and capital development, I'm just going to zero in there, right? These are the fundamental for every African nation to thrive, right? And talking about the rail model or the rail transport industry, right? Away from gasoline, away from fuel, because that's obviously not the future, right? How can we consciously help as people, right, to influence the adoption of such a model? Now, I'm not looking at it from the point of government anymore. I'm talking about this from the point of Africans, just being Africans who want to see Africa thrive.
Well, I believe that so discussions like this are actually one of the ways we can do that, where we keep on hammering on the importance of real and we keep on hammering on the neglect of real by African governments. And we need to continue strongly on this advocacy. In the last few decades, I think one of the reasons why perhaps road networks have also been more primarily convenient for African governments to focus on is because sometimes it's actually very tangible. You can easily see an untarred road, and once it's tarred, you immediately begin to see that people are happy about it. So I think the orientation is really towards seeing a lot of tarred roads around our countries. However, I think in a discussion like this, we also cannot discount the effect of what corruption does. I think it's very easy, for instance, to get your kickbacks from smaller contracting companies as you focus more on roads. And we need to actually now make it actually very expensive in terms of this kind of behavior as well. And so if you had one company or two or three companies investing $350 billion across several countries, I mean, how is your kickback, for instance, going to come in for an African politician? And these are some of the challenges that could hinder development. Tough discussions, but it's important that we bring these tough discussions to the fore so that we can deal with them appropriately. I think it can be done. We need to continuously show, and that's why you'd find someone like me with zero technical background, zero exposure to sleepers, rolling stocks, signals and tracking systems, even talking about rail. Because from an economic development point of view, I can fully understand what rail means to a country. And if as a private citizen I do, then how much more those who hold the public purse and governance as well. So the continuous engagement and advocacy is what will really bring a lot of this to the fore.
That's why we do this at Digital Times Africa. We use conversation as a driving tool to influence changing dynamics of ecosystems, nations, and ensuring that we have a digital thriving Africa. Right. I'm just going to go back to Christine here, and I think you have something else to share with us, just on the model of tech and what the future of the rail industry can look like if we had to sit in and do a deep dive with the tech model.
Yeah, thank you very much, also Arnold, for your views. And I must tell you, I'm completely to change in terms of the way how a business will come in with a 300 billion investment and how carefully this must be managed on the African continent. And just to give you an idea, those guys working on this project, TARC, since 3 years, we are about 65 people, 65 full-time equivalents all over the globe who have invested about 300 million US dollar in this model. And some of them are high potential people coming from the audit industry, from internal audit and external audit. And one of the first things we have developed before we started the project was our code of conduct and the ethical standard. That was the first one. And the second one, before we engage with ministries, it's the anti-corruption, anti-bribery, anti-graft policy. As a matter of fact, to your viewers, if someone wants to have our policy, our anti-corruption, anti-bribery, and anti-graft policy, they can have it from us for free if you send us an email to info@tarkltd.com. So this is a free offer for every business community because we are trying to provide added value. One of the questions of this session also from Richard was not only talking about railway industry, but taking into consideration now in future, if you build railway, taking the power of information technology, of disruptive technology also, because we are not developing rail like 20 years ago, just making a road, then putting some railway sleepers and putting a rolling stock, and that's it. So from the engineering point of view, there are many, many possibilities where technicians, civil engineers, and others working in that industry can profit of the newest technology which is available all around the globe. And we are partnering, for example, with the Trimble company, who supports us the project in terms of analysis. If you want to plan a project like this with 24,000 kilometers all around the sub-Sahara continent, identifying the most valuable corridors, you can imagine what kind of power you need in terms of IT technology instead of manpower. Because if you would do this only with manpower by foot, you will take about 100 years until you have analyzed 24,000 kilometers. So that's why we are using a vision technology, for example, which shows you if you are taking just a corridor from A to B, you can model a lot of things. You can model the most fastest corridor, the most expensive corridor, because you need to build bridges or tunnels, or you can also model the most carbon efficient corridor. Everything is possible today with the newest technology and with a little bit of, let's say, server power and software. So from the concept design, for example, where we are starting into the project management of the project, into construction, until you own everything, you operate and you maintain the whole company. Because when you build a high-speed rail, for example, you don't want to do it for 10 years and then it's gone. It must be sustainable for at least 100 years. So you have to take into consideration modern technology for the whole life cycle. For example, the French Railway Administration, They have decided they only work in construction project with this Trimble Quantum company. The same holds true for Norway, for example. And why shouldn't that be also applicable for the African continent? It covers a lot of specifics, a lot of tools which can be used. I just want to show you the power of such software for infrastructure, for the concept design, scheduling. You have you can build up a common data environment. You can store all the information you need. You can take it for feasibility studies to validate, to compare corridors, to recalculate very easily, to look at the analysis of the carbon calculator, which, by the way, is one of the most important topics in future as well for Africa. You know that Africa is one of the cleanest continent in the world still. But if Africa does not keep care about their future development in the railway and in the highway and the road, with the development of about 5 billion people within 5 to 10 years on the African continent, you will have a carbon problem if you don't plan it in an efficient way. And this holds true as well for the railway industry in future. So these are many points which can be applied also for construction. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing these, Kristen. That's super insightful to have seen that um, we have people who are consciously taking the leap to ensure that we have a thriving African economy or thriving African rail industry just as much as possible in the nearest possible future. I'm very much excited for the job you're doing with TAC, and we're looking forward to contributing to our possible best, like we are using our platform Digital Times Africa, and very much big thanks to SIA Africa. At this point, we are going to look at the questions from our audience and see what they've been saying, what they've been asking, just to help ensure that we have a more dynamic conversation and we have an interactive one as well. Let's get up to the comment section, right? Okay, Alberto Customer says that some Ghanaians are skeptical about the rail system because we know our country has very poor maintenance culture. So, who will be building and managing the rail transport system in Ghana? That's quite an exciting one. I know. Do you want to go for this?
Yes, I would go for it. So I think I did allude to this earlier in my submission.
Yeah, you
We
did.
would still have to build. I mean, poor maintenance culture. So we need to learn the maintenance culture, and we must still build. So as we are building, we are learning. I agree with the poor maintenance culture, but one of the ways to cure it is actually to also train people so that you have a real engine that is not working and we need to wait for an expert to come and fix it. What that does over time is breaks down the maintenance culture because then we all become dependent and there are no skills available for immediate resolution of challenges. And so the lack of maintenance culture notwithstanding, we would still have to build nonetheless and learn how to maintain eventually. An example of if you look at the Akosombo Dam, for instance, in Ghana, it's been run by Ghanaians for well over 50 years. We've never had an incident whatsoever. It's one of the best maintained hydroelectric dams you can find, like anywhere in the world, and it's maintained by Ghanaians, So there are pockets of excellence that we can learn from. And this, for instance, could be one of those areas.
I just want to draw the attention of Christian here, right? I mean, talking about a plan to build a Pan African rail system, right? Could you kindly share with us some of the thoughts around maintenance that you have considered, and how to have the indigents or the people of the countries more involved in the entire process mapping?
Yeah, here I can give you a very clear answer in terms of maintenance. Uh, and this can only, in my opinion, be solved with a private company from private sector. Because if you can imagine, you can take another company like Turkish Airlines or like Qatar Airlines. This is also a private company. You know, they're flying all around the globe. So Park will also be a private African company which needs to keep care about the service quality, about the pricing, about the maintenance. And if you are a private company, you will be focused very, very much to get the right people with the right knowledge and to maintain these people highly motivated for a long time period working for this company, building the complete know-how in the sector, helping also to build railway universities, to insource people. If people get retired after 30 years, to have enough people coming again into this company. And in my opinion, to be honest, this can only be driven in future from the private sector. And we will see a lot of private sector, let's say, contribution in each country, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, not only in railway, but also in banking, but in insurance, in whatsoever technology. And I must say, the youth of today is ready. People are there. If you look at Ghana, for example, you find a lot of people on the university, Kwame Nkrumah University of Technology. You have people studying three studies. Why? Because they're still unemployed. They don't find an adequate space to work with because the private sector is not there. But if the private sector steps in, this private sector will get these highly motivated, very well educated people, and they will be happy. This will be the people boosting the whole sector in the African continent. You just have to give those people the opportunity to be employees of these new companies and never give control back again to government. This has failed in the past, and it will fail in the future. And this is the challenge of the next few 1 or 2 years, because if you look at the concession landscape, who provides you the concession to operate the railway? It's always the government. It's always the government giving it to you or not. If they don't give it to you, they have to give it. They have to make it themselves. If they make it themselves, they will fail. So, in our opinion, then the change of mindset must also come on the African Union level, on the regional economic community level, and on the country level. We are actually in discussion with the NEPAD PIDA program, the one who are responsible, the units on the African Union for this big, huge high-speed railway network program. So we are already in discussion. Everyone is telling us, good idea, good approach. This solves a lot of problems for us, mainly the finance problems, because to be honest, the finance is not there on the African continent and in those countries. And even if you're talking about pension funds, you can never finance 300 billion with pension funds. But I must say, the money is there. The money is there on special acquisition vehicles all around the globe, in New York, in Europe, in UK, whatsoever. Maybe not from Russia or China, but more on the Western hemisphere. The money is there, but the projects are not there. So we did it the other way around. We did the homework. We worked 3 years on this project. Why? Because I was born in the Belgian Congo. I grew up in Ghana the first 20 years of my life. And this is with our diaspora of Germany, our diaspora of Switzerland and Austria. We pulled together bright-minded people to provide a solution, an offer for the African continent and for the ministries. And actually, we're getting a lot of good feedback. We have never seen the showstopper, but we know we have to overcome a lot of still situations. Also, working together is an issue on the African continent. Every country is still focused on themselves, but if you are connecting a country to another, you have to work together with the other country as well. This is the same issue like you have driven the African Continental Free Trade Area, then the same issue like you have driven the PAPS payment system of Afreximbank. The same issue will come also with the TransAfrica Railway Corporation. But believe me, it will come. It will come in this decade. And in the next 2 months, you will hear a lot of good news in terms of announcement on the African continent.
I think my mic is muted. Yeah. So would certainly want to hear a lot of good news around this project, because then we would have an alleviated African front. Um, Benedict Ajay Oklu asks, okay, what change will it make when petrol keeps going up every day? So I think, yeah, Benedict is trying to put across that um, with the hikes in petrol prices as a result of maybe the Russia and the Ukraine war, not continually affect the transport industry in terms of transportation cost.
Well, if I may give an answer,
Yeah,
you have
please feel
seen
free. Go ahead.
I think some 1 or 2 weeks ago, a high-speed rail from Abuja to Lagos went out of petrol. So people stranded because they didn't have petrol. This will never happen with a new high-speed rail because it will be electrified. The only
Mm.
issue is there enough electricity all over the African continent? And the answer for the
That's another
moment,
problem.
yeah, and the answer is no. There is not enough electricity to operate the high-speed rail. But this is a piece of work. We are also working on it. Not only the high-speed rail, but the hydropower project all over the African continent, starting from the Democratic Republic Congo. That's why we have allocated about 40 billion US dollar to such a project that can produce the electricity to the high speed rail. And moreover, not only to the high speed rail, but also to the local communities and the countries. We took it as a complete business case where you build it from scratch. And you have to think about different issues altogether.
Great of you to mention, because I just thought about it. What other problems internally faced by some of these countries could actually contribute to the negligence of such a project in the future? But I mean, before we go deeply into that, I probably think we'll probably have to come back with a different episode just to talk about the progress we are making with TAC and the rail transport industry in Africa. Alberta Customer again asks, what measures are they putting into place? I mean, probably I think she's referring to TAC here. What measure are you putting into place to ensure, I mean, security wise, with all the highway robbery and terrorism on roads and African borders? Huh. I mean, let's look at security. And does the high speed rail or the intra or interconnected cities and rail transport solve the heightened security challenges we face across African nations? Arnold, you can go first.
Yeah, I thank you, Richard. So this would, I mean, highway robbery is an unfortunate incident which occurs across a lot of African countries, and especially in let's say, vastly or less populated areas. What it then means
Yeah,
is that it's very difficult for security services to even reach such areas. You usually do not have such issues on railways, and unless, of course, you have these robbers boarding the train. I don't think that high speed rail, there's anybody who would want to dare to stop a high speed rail to rob it. I mean, the amount of electricity that's going through, I mean, the area where the train is even passing alone should keep everybody away. And then that said, obviously, you'd want to have security on these trains as well. So um, the robbery also affects not just people who travel, but it's also even the roadblocks we create when goods are moving across borders. And you have all these artificial roadblocks that are created not just by robbers, but even by sometimes customs officials to extract money from drivers and all of that cutting goods. So once you
Yeah.
have goods being carried across as well, you are going to see that goods can now flow freely without a lot of hindrance. So, rail will actually be a solution and a panacea to all the robbery we see around the highways.
All right, thank you so much for that submission. That's all time will allow for today's episode of the Digital Factory Dialogue Series. My name is Richard Joseph, and this episode of the DT Africa Digital Factory Show was brought to you in collaboration with SIA Africa. I still have Christian on the call from SIA Africa. I don't know if she would like to share last words before we call it a day for today. Hi, Christian.
Hi, yes. I guess I'll close this out by saying this has been a really comprehensive deep dive on the realities of installing tech-driven rail in Africa. Thank you again, Arnold and Christian, for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And thank you so much, Richard, for hosting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting. You're watching DT Africa Digital Factory Show, where we leverage on conversation to drive solution-oriented thought processing across the African continent, especially on the front of digitalization. You can feel free to visit our website www.digitaltimes.africa for more Afrocentric insights around the ecosystem on tech entrepreneurship and innovation. This show was brought to you, powered by SIA Africa, once again in collaboration with Digital Times Africa. Thank you. Catch you on the flip side. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.